Now let's talk about, okay, once you get past this decade, then you get into your 50s and beyond. And for some people, this may be retirement. For some people, this may be putting down the landing gear, heading towards retirement. But there are still challenges that you face. And one of the most common challenges that we see amongst the clients that we work with at Abound Wealth is there is some difficulty in wrapping your head around this idea of, man, I've been a saver for my entire life. I've been taught to accumulate. And now all of a sudden, magically, I'm supposed to hit financial independence. I put in my 2 weeks notice, and then I flip the switch and I turn into spender. It's a difficult and unique and hard transition to make. So the earlier you can start thinking about and preparing for it, the more likely you're going to set yourself up for success.
Well, talking about transitions also, I think so many things you do in your 20s, 30s, and even 40s is back in the napkin math. You can do the 4% rule. You can do a savings rate of 25%. I think when you get in your 50s, you're actually going to want to fine tune this down to know exactly what your number is. You want to stress test, because this is not one of those things where you're just trying to get close like you're playing horseshoes. You're going to be living off these resources. And when you put your notice in, you might not be able to make the same amount of money ever again.
That's
so
right.
You better measure twice, cut once. So you need to know exactly where your number is. And that's why this is an important thing that you need to face as a challenge in your 50s.
And then as you think through this, one of the realities is in this stage, you begin to recognize your mortality. You begin to recognize that, man, there will be an end to this journey one day. And even though that is a reality, and we all know that it's true, 67% of folks over the age of 50 do not have a will in place, and 52% of folks in their 50s suggest that they have no idea where their parents keep their estate documents. So if you're not having these conversations, both for yourself as well as the generation ahead of you, you're not going to set yourself up for a smooth transition. So you want to begin having, even though they may be uncomfortable, having those conversations now while everyone can have them in a very healthy manner.
Well, and that sets up the goals, because if you do this right, it's back to that statement is we want you to be able to focus your precious resource of time on what really matters to you. So security in your financial planning, having things where they're just working for you is going to be so important as you get in your 50s and beyond.
And if you can put this plan in place, one of the things it's going to allow you to do is have some comfort with what your plan is. Okay, I've had the hard conversations. We've done the difficult analysis. I now know that if something happens to me, if something happens to my spouse, I know what's going to happen. My kids know what's going to happen. The plan is in place. It's not going to be a bunch of unknown. And when you can fill in those variables and have less unknown unknowns, it's going to lead to a higher level of confidence going into this next stage.
And how about using money as a tool to build the legacy that you want? Look, and that's not a legacy of that I'm just going to leave behind $1 gazillion to my kids so that I can live like a tightwad my entire life, and then they can live this big life. No, this means as money, what do I want it to do? What do I actually want to be represented for me while I'm in retirement, but also even beyond my retirement? Don't sleep on that, because I think so many financial mutants just build, and don't think about the legacy part of what their money why is, so they can get that reflected in the plan.
So if those are the challenges and goals, what areas of your financial plan should you focus on? How should you think about it? Well, in your 50s and from your 50s and beyond, it's really a combination of both risk management. How do I protect all the things that I've done up to this stage? And then estate planning. What do I ultimately want to happen with the resources that I've built up?
Yeah, I think a lot of financial mutants will realize you'll hit this stage in life where you realize you're not leaving this planet with nothing. Mm-hmm. So how do we make the most of this? And a lot of you are probably working off of the 4% withdrawal rule.
Sure.
As I've already talked about earlier, a lot of back of the napkin. Now it's time to actually create a budget off of what your actual expenses are, put it into an investment plan, and actually risk test that. Mm-hmm. I mean, run it through Monte Carlo simulations and other things, so you actually go into it with a real understanding of what you're facing versus just what you've kind of spot checked over the years.
Another thing that you need to be doing at this stage is making sure you understand your portfolio allocation. And you may be saying, whoa, guys. That's investing. You're talking about risk management here, but one of the biggest risks that we see with folks who get later on in their working life and early into retirement is they never actually adjust their glide path in their portfolio. They think the same portfolio that they had when they were 20, 30, or 40 years old should be the same portfolio they have when they're 50, 60, 70. And that's likely not the case. You want to make sure that the portfolio that you have right now reflects not only your risk tolerance, how much can you handle, but also your risk capacity. How much risk should you have in your portfolio? So at this stage, part of your financial plan needs to be making sure you have an allocation that is appropriate for the stage of life that you're in.
Well, and your older self will thank you, because when you hit that, when you leave the workforce and you actually hit that first downturn, Bo, tell me how many people we talk to who they think that they can handle the risk tolerance of anything, until all of a sudden now they're living off this money, and then the market goes down 20%, 25%, and they all of a sudden have that puckered up moment. You're going to realize you want some of your money. It's back to that risk capacity point. For short term, for midterm, and even long terms, diversification will become your friend.
I think it's Mike Tyson who says everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face. And that's what a bear market does to retirees. It's the first time you experience that. Well, one of the ways that you can even protect yourself from that, in addition to the allocation, is reviewing your cash reserves. Do I have an appropriate emergency reserve? Not necessarily just 3 months of living expenses or 6 months of living expenses, but do I have the 12 months, the 18 months, so that no matter what happens in the market, no matter how wonky the economy gets, I know I have my living expenses covered, and I give my portfolio time to recover. This is a conversation you need to be having, and a thought that you need to be thinking through as you enter into this stage of life.
So on the financial planning for 50s and beyond, we talked about estate planning, but I'll be honest with you. We saw in a previous stat for the 40s, nobody does wills, nobody plans. It's hard to do content on estate planning because you guys don't want to show up to watch that either. Nobody really wants to cover and talk about estate planning, but that's okay. We know that this is such a valuable need that we've done the hard work for you. We want to encourage you to go to moneyguy.com, go to our resources, and when you tab over it, you'll see we have ultimate guides, and one of the first ultimate guides we have is the Estate Planning Ultimate Guide. Go through the difficult exercise, because believe me, guys, you have built something amazing. If you're a financial mutant, you've built up these resources. Don't let just life happen. Take an active role in making sure you're going through this exercise, so it doesn't just wake up and one day you have created a big mess, not only for yourself, but for your legacy and your loved ones.
So how do you do it? What are the things that you ought to be thinking about? Well, the very first one is, do you actually have your documents in place? And remember, the will that you got in place when your first child was born might not be the same will that you need 30 years later when your financial situation has changed, when your family financial situation has changed. Make sure that you update these documents and you have them in place. You have the wills, you have the powers of attorney, you have the healthcare directives, and you have communicated to the people in those documents what their responsibilities are. Hey, son, daughter, I want you to be my executor, and this is the way our estate plan is going to work, and this is what your part of that process is going to be. If you don't want to have those conversations now, you need to recognize how difficult it's going to be when you're not actually here to speak for yourself.
Well, and I think a lot of people, when they think of legacy, they think of the assets they're going to leave behind to their loved ones. But I think it's even bigger than that. What if you can actually start thinking about now and in the coming years of how much you even want to share while you're still here to watch your children and your loved ones benefit from this? If it's education goals, if it's charitable goals, why not take that active role now versus just leaving beyond a pot of money that will hopefully have all these positive things? I think if you take an active role and start the planning, you actually get to experience some of that goodness while you're still here.